Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. In this video is to bring you a closer look at the Bommer number LB4373-400-652. This is a spring hinge. It's not really common for us to sell, and I know that it's somewhat new as a product from Bommer, because I know that it didn't exist in their catalog just a few years ago. This is a spring hinge. This is a single acting spring hinge that's unique and is a LB Lube bearing. That is a maintenance-free type of bearing construction from Bommer. They use that on their spring hinges and other hinges. Yeah, I think they'll call their three-knuckle hinges LB as well. Actually, I'm quite sure that they do. Very high quality sort of construction of hinge. The LB400 is a single-acting spring hinge series. The 4373 specifically tells us everything about this dimensionally. Well, it tells us everything about it dimensionally except the size. The size is the next part of the part number. But if you have a 4373, then you have a hinge that's 5/8 radius on all four corners. You have a single acting spring hinge that's 5/8 radius. You have one leaf that is a template pattern and the other leaf that is not. This is called Heritage 1 as the door and frame manufacturer. I'm not familiar with Heritage 1. I'm going to say that they're a company like Johnson or Therma-Tru, Permador, Stanley, whatever the application is. Heritage 1 has this hole pattern, apparently. Template on one side, staggered on the other. There is a link below this video to the template that will show you the location of those holes, and you would certainly want to verify the location of all the holes before purchasing this. And I say that because there's 10 other types that, not that it could be, but there's probably 12 other hinge types or 15 that are different from each other in the corner treatment, in the size of the leaf, and most importantly here is the location of the holes for the screws. So you'll need to verify that what you're dealing with. No reason to not eliminate the guesswork. There's a link below this video to the template where you can indeed view that, and I'm looking at it now. And anyway, back to the template. This hinge is, to my knowledge, only available as a 4x4, 4" by 4". That means it's 4" tall and it's 4" wide. It's important to note that the height is the first dimension. Maybe you don't need to know that when you're dealing with a hinge that's basically square, but you would sure want to know that the height is the first dimension when you're dealing with something that would be 5 by 4.5 or 3.5 by 6. You want to know which dimension is going to be that first dimension, and it is indeed the height. So it's counterintuitive in the sense of doors are the opposite way. Width first, then height. Hinges are height first. And I think that's really because what's most important on a door? Well, how wide it is. I mean, that's going to be the first thing. The height's important, but the width is going to be that's where we start. The hinge is the same way, because what's most important to the hinge is indeed the height, because the height is what really is connected to the hinge's capacity to hang the door. A 3.5 hinge versus a 4 versus a 4.5 versus 5, 6, 8. All is directly related to its capacity, its ability to hold a door and hang a door. The width is not. The height certainly is. Let's move on. Now, those hole locations are there for the hinges. You can review that. The leaf thickness is 96 thousandths. Also, what's inferred in that part number is that it is a full surface hinge. And you can see from the swag on the hinge leaves here that when the leaves are brought parallel, they're meant to be mortised flush to the edge of the door and frame, so that you maintain that typical margin between the leaves, which would be, according to the template, it's basically a 32nd of an inch, but that's going to be more than that. Your door is going to stand a bit further open. The gap between the door and frame will be a bit greater than that. LB4373 tells us Heritage 1, the location, the 5/8 radius on all four corners. The Dash 400 tells us the size. Bommer's sizing convention is that area of 3 digits. Dash 400 is a 4.5-inch hinge. Dash 350, 3.5. Dash 454 is a 4.5 by 4. Okay, and it goes on and on. Now the Dash 652, that means 3 things. That means that it's made of steel. That means that it is satin chrome plated. It's got a touch of clear lacquer on it as well. This is a spring hinge, which means that it is listed. This is a Bommer spring hinge in their LB4000 series. That means it's listed. That is a listed product. It's also a labeled product. It says listed. That means this hinge has been tested and found compliant under the duress of a fire test. It is also labeled because it bears visual evidence of the fact that it's been listed. Products can be listed. They can be listed and labeled. There hopefully is not a labeled product that's not listed. Why is that important? Well, a couple of things. 3 things I can think of. Number one, you know the factory's tested it. You don't want a product on your door that's not been tested, and many spring hinges are not tested. Number 2 is that you will know that it's compliant to use on your fire-rated door, which is possibly where you're using this, but maybe not. If this is on the front door of your home, it's probably not fire-rated. But if it's on your attached garage, that door could easily have a 20-minute rating on it, which would require you to be self-closing with an approved closing device, which a spring hinge is. But bringing us to step 3, code states that spring hinges in that application must be labeled. So if you're dealing with a fire-rated door and you've got a spring hinge that is not labeled, you don't have a fire-rated door. Just be mindful of that. I'm not the code police, but that's what code says. Code literally says it must be labeled. Minimum of 2 spring hinges on doors, I think up to 7 foot. I don't recall the code. That's all in NFPA 80 is where you're certainly going to find direct language that addresses it. So when you're buying the Bommer product and you're fire rated, as long as you're installing the proper quantity of hinges, you're in good shape. If you put 1, you're going to be in violation. The other requirement is that you have to be 2 seconds to close. I think that's from about 80 degree down to about 20 degree, something like. I forget that code. That I believe is in. It might be an NFPA 101. It will certainly give definitions in the ADA resource guide for handicap compliance, the federal guide for that. I don't recall those exact particulars. Doesn't matter as long as we know how to find the answer, right? And if you have a question specifically on that, I will certainly dust off my rusty memory on that. So the template tells us the dimensional properties, everything else. Talking about the screw hole locations, they're going to give you screws. They're all machine screws. If you have need for some wood screws, be sure to indicate that. This client specifically requested all AMS, all metal screws. You may not need all metal screws. You might have a wood door, I guess. Something tells me that Heritage 1 is a metal door, metal clad type manufacturer, but you might be using it in an instance where you need some wood screws. So indicate that at the time of order. Indicate that you need AMS or AWS, all wood screws, or just say, I need half and half. Half and half, that sort of thing. Okay, so the rest of the template is there. It is an equal leaf hinge on both sides to the center line. Not all of these are. Almost all are, but not all are, so be mindful of that. Now, there is some extended description information down below. Before we get to that, this hinge is going to be available in all of the common finishes, your brasses, your bronze, your chromes, satin polished, oil rubbed. They can do zinc. They can do black Japan, bright black japanned. And because it's Bommer, they can probably plate the material in practically any finish that you want. But if it's not one of the 15 that are listed, reach out to us. We'll have Bommer take a look at it and see if they can do it. Full mortise hinge. It is UL rated. It's grade 1 as well. It's a 1,000,000 cycle hinge, and I think the engineer at Bommer told me. I had asked, yeah, I said to him, I've got a customer who the hinges failed on him, and that's, you know, that saying that to Bommer is akin to, and while this will certainly be an exaggeration, it's akin to a blasphemous statement, meaning the caliber of the Bommer product line is exceptional. Their attention to detail is equally exceptional. As evidenced by the time that I spoke to the engineer there and said the spring hinge failed. He said, really? He says, I've had one of those spring hinges on my testing machine for the last 3 months. It's currently at 3.5 million cycles, and I just turned the machine off because I didn't see any reason to let it keep running. Meaning this is a grade 1 hinge. It's rated for 1 million cycles. He stopped testing it after 3.5 million, I think, just because, you know, long story short, the client installed the hinge in a surface-mounted application. Forgive me. In a surface-mounted application, and that's not the way these work. So when you open it to have it close, he knew immediately. He says, did they install it in a reverse application? They had surface-mounted. I said, oh my gosh, I don't know. Let me ask. I doubt it, but I think I should ask. Send me a picture of your installation, I said to the client. They sent it to me. Sure enough, they were surface mounted. Well, you can do that. You just need to order it that way. You need a reverse spring hinge. So the point of the matter is they take incredible pride in the caliber of it and incredible pride in not missing the parts that you require to get this installed. Okay, incredible pride. So now let's take a look at the next link down below, which is going to be installation instructions. Okay, now the installation instruction basically tells you how to just set the hinge. You're going to install the hinge like any other hinge. When it comes out of the box, there's no tension set on it at all. Just hang your door. If you are installing 2 hinges when you would need 3 or whatever, be mindful that you're going to want to be mindful that you're going to install your spring hinges middle and bottom first. Top as the last option. The top hinge is actually the hinge that does 70% of the work of actually hanging the door. So putting the spring hinge there is the last place that you'll put it because it will be the least effective. Okay, now the tension. I had kind of shown you quickly earlier. For every order that you place, you're going to get at least 1 tension rod. For every hinge that you order on the single acting, you're going to get 1 tension pin. Okay? This client ordered 2 hinges, so there are 2 tension pins. The bottom line is this. When you install the hinge, and it can be installed either way, left hand or right hand, so long as the tension collar is pointed towards the top of the door, you're going to install the tension rod. And you are going to insert the tension rod into one of the available holes that are here and turn it clockwise. As you do so, you reveal a new hole, and into one of those new holes you'll insert the tension pin. And that's what will retain tension on the installation. If you're going to 90 degree, you can go up to 4 holes of set tension. If you get past that, limit it to 3 holes. If you hear your hinge, if you hear the spring inside the hinge creaking, or you feel like it's contorting, it's too much tension on that, or the job that it's being asked to do is beyond what it's engineered to do. If it's pushed that far, it can break, and they will break. I've had people call, hey, the hinge, it broke. Oh, how many hinges you put on? 1. How big's the door? It's a 4x7. How many times did you set the pin? I don't know, 7 or 8. It's going to snap the first time. So those are the guidelines in that. So you can install it either way. If you're going to install the tension collar, you notice there's not one here, just rotate it counterclockwise. Now the issue that we have with this spring hinge, and depending on the quantity that you order, you can mix and match. You can mix and match. You need to have a hinge that is going to be obviously compatible in terms of the width of the hinge, a 4-inch wide hinge. You can't have a 4x4 and then a 4x5. You have to have that vertical axis of pivoting accurate. And also the thickness of the leaf needs to be within margin. So this is a 96 thousandths hinge, so that hinge leaf can be between 0.85 and 109. 0.085 and 0.109 thickness, and then you can mix and match. Make that other hinge or hinges, ball bearing hinges, put those at the top, and let your spring hinges work near the bottom. That'll work. So the hinge certification guide is the last link that's there, and that is going to tell you how many hinges to use. You will notice that there's never less than 2 listed, and that's because of code, which is probably mentioned on this page as well. This is it does. Labeled doors. Maximum door sizes and number of hinges required is based on limits set forth in NFPA 80. That's the fire safety code. Standard. It's a standard is what it is. It's not a code. The NFPA 80 becomes a code when it's referenced in a code document. So NFPA 80 is technically a standard. But it's certainly adopted in code. So you'll have two, that portion is adopted in code. So you'll have 2 spring hinges and 1 butt hinge if you're dealing with the 3.5, 4, or 4.5, 70, 85, 115 pound type door range. Okay. Let's take a look at when you need 2 spring hinges in those instances. Now when we're dealing with like a 4-inch hinge, you got a door that's 110 pounds, you're going to want three spring hinges on that door. That hinge certification guide is also nice because it also tells you that 3070 is your maximum door leaf size. That is listed in code. When it comes to non-labeled doors, your limitations are not enforceable via code, but they do say a maximum of 4.0 by 7'6" would be a door leaf that you wouldn't exceed. Etc. So you can read the balance of all of that there. Now finally, there is a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Bommer products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. The last thing I'd like to point out to you is the Bommer logo. It's hard to see the stamp, or the coining's a bit light. Right above it, you can see it when you look at it. It says Made in USA. That's a fact that Bommer is quite proud of, as am I to represent them. And then also has the evidence of the labeling of their listed nature of the product there as well. You can see it better, a little bit better there. Okay. Any questions on this LB4373-400 and a 652 finish, or any other Bommer product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.